Hello, welcome to another episode of Grace Speaks, a Grace Church podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Alexa Morion, and with me I have our other host.
I'm Katia and Alexa.
And today we're going to do a Missions Moment podcast with, I'll let him introduce himself.
Hey, what up, everybody? This is Pastor Segun Aiyegbusi, Shegz from Nigeria, the city of Jos in Nigeria. Hope y'all are doing well.
Yay. It's so great to see you again, Shegz. I can't tell you how much we've missed you here.
Absolutely. I miss our little, you know what I miss? I miss Chick-fil-A.
Yes.
All the Chick-fil-A lunches. It's hard to come across a good sandwich here, but I miss having that with you guys, not just
just a sandwich.
Not just a sandwich. The community of eating together.
Yeah.
I miss having Chris go pick up our Chick-fil-A.
True.
Well, like I said, we're having Shegz as a guest, and it's really exciting to see all the stuff that he's doing in Jos. So let's get started and hear what he has to say. So basic first question, because I'm sure everyone's curious and I'm curious. How are you and the family doing?
Yeah, we are doing well, man. Thank you, Alexa. And gosh, I just forgot who is Katia. I'm sorry. We're doing well. I almost said Katniss, thinking Hunger Games.
Actually, Katia,
really
can you do a braid and just archery get into that?
No, we're doing really well. Our we since November, I think we've settled in. A lot of the fears and insecurities that I had, my worst fears that I had about transitioning my family to Nigeria have not come to pass.
That's awesome.
Yeah, there's still some stuff going on around our state, some violence, but whenever you're moving overseas, man, what's going to happen? Will the kids be okay? And I got to say, my kids have adjusted really well, surprisingly so. Then me, my wife is most naturally adjusted, and so I would say we're all doing well. We're happy, we're grateful. Yeah, so we're doing good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good to hear. How has the transition been from church planting to pastor, being a pastor of pastors going? And what's been that hardest part of the transition, since you mentioned your kids are kind of transitioning a bit easier than you are?
I think when we first came to Nigeria when we left New Jersey to come to Nigeria, our plan was twofold, right? It was, we were going to plant a church and we were going to train pastors, right? Our vision was that we would be a church that raises pastors who plant churches. However, when we got to Nigeria, just a bunch of circumstances, a bunch of unfortunate events came together that prevented us. A number of our team members who were going to be a part of our core church planning team relocated and left the country because of COVID. And then some of them actually relocated within Nigeria because of how bad things were in Jos. And not only due to COVID, but even because of the violence, it was escalating at that time. So it was we got here and God's psych, we got here and we're oh, our team's not here. And then not only that, when we got here, because of COVID, churches weren't really sure what they were doing. Some churches were not meeting, some were closed, some were highly restrictive, some were meeting, and the government wasn't really being clear, but was locking down on certain. So it was weird. And anyway, all that to say that the reason why we shifted to pastoral training wasn't because we're not doing church planting anymore. It was just not the timing. And so we foresee in the near future that we will either plant a church or raise up someone or a group of people who do plant a church. So that may be, depending on, we're praying through that. So that may come sooner or later, we're discerning. Having said that, the transition from being a pastor on staff at Grace with other pastors to training pastors has been a growing learning experience, right? And some of that is because I think, there's some of that insecurity, who am I to be training pastors? I'm a teaching pastor on Sunday night at New Jersey. But I think when I got to Nigeria, I realized a couple of things. Number one is a lot of pastors here are either self-taught or just learned about church in church. So there's no formal ministry training.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of them just kind of started, which unfortunately explains a lot of why there's a lot of, really false, I don't say false gospel, just I think in Nigeria, the teaching ranges from heresy to a synergistic teaching, which is you're mixing Christianity with a bunch of other local religions,
Mm.
to they just don't know what they don't really haven't really studied the Bible. So anyway, all that to say that when I got here and we were transitioning, it just hit me that, wait a minute, I have been prepared for this. Like I am in a position, and by God's grace, between my seminary training and ministry experience, God has put me in a position where the things that I know about ministry and about teaching, about running a church are like gold here in Nigeria.
Right.
So, and God made that pretty clear very quickly with, I mean, there were some things I was teaching and people were like, I was teaching, I met with a church to talk about guest services, how to welcome new guests.
Okay.
Something that we do casually at Grace, and they described it as revolutionary.
Wow.
You
Oh,
know?
wow.
Yeah. So, and then, I would do a sermon, like some of the sermons I taught at Grace, I'd teach it and they'd be like, we've never heard this before. And I'm like, oh, okay. I see what God's doing here. So I say that to say, I say it's been a growing experience because I'm growing into that role. I'm growing into that role of pastoring other pastor. I still, if I'm being honest, I still miss the church life a little bit. My family and I have one of our, which I guess I'll add this as my prayer request. And let me know when I'm talking too much because I got stuff to say. So,
Shegz, this is who you are.
Okay.
I'm not gonna change you now.
this is who you are, Shegz. You talk a lot. So, 25-minute sermon guy. Okay. Oh gosh, what was I saying?
A prayer request you're gonna add, but then you were talking
Yeah.
about. Okay.
So part of it is we still haven't found a church to get connected to. So from November till around maybe 3 months ago, we were meeting on our compound. A compound is where a number of houses are located. And we were meeting there because of COVID and all of that. But several months ago, we stopped meeting. And so we've been visiting different churches and just none is really working. Between the teaching, the music is when I say loud, I don't mean like it's painfully loud.
Oh.
You ask anyone who goes to church, any foreigner who goes to church in Nigeria, it's almost unbearable. My kids wear earplugs to church. It's not entertaining loud, it's like painful loud. And then it's just really long and you're out. So anyway, I don't say that to complain, but to make the point that we've really struggled to find a church to connect to. And so a part of that, there's been that desire that, man, we could really start something here. That would certainly serve our family and other missions family and other international families. But anyway, to your question, the transition has been a growing experience to become a pastor training other pastors, a fun growing experience.
That's good. It's awesome to see that you did go there for one thing, but there was such a need to almost like build that foundation for church planting, which is like you need shepherds for that. So that's amazing.
Honestly, like what you just said right now, Katia, that's one of the things God's been putting on my heart lately that where I thrive at is, from my experience, is putting on a church service. I know how to do church. I know how to run a Sunday service. I know how to put together what I think Armin trained me in this, and I've certainly learned a lot under him. But I think it occurs to me now that by me focusing on how to develop pastors and leaders, God was actually teaching me how to do the things behind the scenes that make a church run.
Right.
That makes sense, right? So had I just come and started a church plan, I would have played to my strengths, which is putting on a good show, like putting on a great Sunday morning experience. But you and I know that it takes a lot more than a great Sunday service for a church to be effective. You need leaders behind the scenes who are godly, who love the Lord, who are shepherding others. And so I think that's what the Lord, Duca and I were reflecting on this, and we realized that, wow, what if God in his wisdom was like, you're not going to plant a church, you're going to spend these next year or however long learning how to raise up leaders so that when it's time to plant a church, you know how to do it, one, and you have some people you've trained. So it's been a win. It's really been a win. Yeah, a win-win.
So while you're in your search of a church, do you think that this search for your own personal church has do you think you would, like, when you church plant, would you do one that's more focused on like the international people, or would you try to do more for like a different style of church for the people of Nigeria? Do you think that they would benefit from how, this is a weird way to say it, but how we do church here in the States?
Yeah. So yes and yes. Yes, in the sense that I think when we do a church, and I'll tell you why I said yes and yes. It's actually, there's a strategic plan behind it. There's purpose behind it. One is we would shoot to plan an international style church.
Mm.
When I say international, it'll be a mixture of both Nigerian and foreign. And it's not just Americans. You have Canadians, we have Irish, we have a lot of English, and so a lot of missionaries from all over the world in Jos. Jos is where missionaries in Nigeria come to.
Mm.
And honestly, when we came first place, that was one of the things that burdened us. We were like, there's a community of people here who are investing in Nigerians who don't have a place where they're worshiping. Anyway, that said, our strategy would be to plan an international church to reach not only the missions community, but also there's a lot of well-traveled and well-educated Nigerians who really are also struggling. I mean, I cannot put to words how much there's a lack of a Bible-based gospel. Well, that's not true. There are a few, but they're very few Bible-based gospel-focused church. And so our strategy would be to do that. And here's why. Nigerians, the locals, are drawn like moth to a flame. They are drawn to anything international.
Okay.
So as odd as it sounds, if you want to reach the locals, you reach the foreigners. It'll draw Nigerians. Yeah, it really has. Like even the few times that I've spoken at churches, like the fact that the Nigerian America has drawn people in. So it's kind of a strategy where, and when I say foreign, it's not going to be, it would be Nigerians led. It wouldn't be a team of foreigners.
Right.
But so I think our strategy would be to start there. And also remember, our goal has always been not only to plant a church, but to plant a church where we train pastors to go plant churches. And so I envision a scenario where we plant a church, an international church. We're reaching the international community, the educated community, the locals who are drawn to it, but we're also raising from within that group someone to go plant it somewhere that's more local. Because when I say local too, in Jos, there's over 500 dialects. Like you can go down the street and the guy next to you doesn't speak what the guy who works in your guardhouse speaks. So you almost have to market your audience. And like even I speak some of the local dialect, but I can only reach a certain group of people. So to your question, that's what at least what we're thinking and praying through. I think we would start with we would gear for something international, and a big piece of this is also one of our passions before we left Nigeria was whatever church we established, we are going to go 100% with our children's ministry, because if you reach children, you reach the family.
Right.
And so I say that to say that strategy would appeal not only international, but would have a wide appeal. And so that's a piece of it. And then, but we planned that I would still continue training leaders. And as I do, those guys would be sent off to say, hey, this community. In fact, when I share with you later on, one of the things that I'm excited about, I'll connect this question to that.
Ooh, a teaser for the future.
Yeah.
All right. So you kind of touched a little bit about this, but let's dive in a little more. Like what part of your journey in the mission field has been the most surprising / challenging to you?
Yeah. So most surprising. Well, let me start with challenge. Well, let me start with surprising. Well, let me start with challenging.
All right.
As gracious as God has been to us, there's something, I think I spoke about this the last time we were on the Zoom call. There's something called culture shock, and there's something called culture stress. Culture shock is more of the whole, it's like a whiplash where you're just, but culture stress is a little bit more, it's over time, where a lot of the little things that you're accustomed to, little things as simple as just internet, where, or constant electricity, or, like the news says, oh, your armed bandits in town. So wherever you're going, be careful, like that's not stuff at home. You worry, you call 911. There's no 911 here. Like your only 911 is a machete and hopefully a gun in your house. So I think the challenging thing has been, and any missionary experiences this, but being removed from a familiar culture and being in an environment where a lot of your basic amenities are not necessarily there, everything from security to even little things like, like I'll wake up some morning and I'm just jonesing for like a burger, like a good burger, like a cheesed up, like
Mhm.
kind of like, yo, I'm not getting that today. And then in Joss is a little more rural, so we have to go further. So anyway, I would say that's probably the biggest challenge. It's been just adjusting. It's the little things.
Mhm.
Um, and then the other part of it is a little more, I don't know, personal, but you guys would know this, but I miss having, I miss being on staff with a team of
Mhm.
other pastors. I really miss that. Like, I'm sort of I'm on my own here, and I'm putting together a new team, and we're growing ever gradually. But I miss that. I miss being able to, hey, I'm thinking about this for ministry, or I'm thinking about the theological. I can walk across the hall into Pastor Cameron's room or Armin's room, or come out and come chat with you guys. Or when we're in
Mhm.
Bethlehem, I really miss that. Like that's I miss that fellowship.
Yeah.
And so I would say those would probably be the areas of challenging. As far as surprising goes, that actually has to do with a pastoral training seminar that we recently hosted and will continue to host. So I put together a seminar, a pastor training seminar on soul care,
Mm.
and
It's a
soul
nice
care is
name.
about what's that?
It's a nice name, Soul Care.
It's soul care. Yeah, I mean, it pretty much, it's about, as Christians, we tend to spiritualize everything. And it's like, our goal is not just to be spiritually healthy Christians, but to be emotionally healthy Christians.
Mm.
And so, and it's about digging up a lot of wounds from your past that
Mhm.
have shaped who you are as an adult, right? So there's a
Mm.
lot of things, traumatic experience, some not so traumatic, but there are things that many of us experience early in life that have shaped how we view God, how we view life, how we view others, how we see ourselves. And so this course has several. It's a 3-day course that deals with several things, including releasing shame, dealing with strongholds, addressing a religious spirit, identifying the wounds, the father wounds. Anyway, all of
Mhm.
that. Now, Nigeria is an honor/shame based culture, which means you avoid at all costs anything that might bring you shame or that might bring your family shame. It means that the way we get you to do things in Nigeria is by shaming you. So
Oh.
there's a lot of, and then Nigerians, we don't talk about our wounds.
Mm.
In fact, this has been used to, if girls get molested, they don't talk about this, especially for family member, because it would bring shame. So I say there's this culture where we don't talk about those deep things.
Mm.
In fact, one of the seminars the most recent one I hosted, one of the girls, and I'll tell you what happened, but one of the girls commented halfway through it. She's like, "This is revolutionary for us because we've never talked about it." She says, "I've gone to my mom in the past to bring up some issues that went on," and I can't say what she said in the dialect, but she essentially said her mom was like, "There's 2 million people in Jos, and you think I have time for yours?"
Yeah.
And so the point being, we don't deal with it. Anyway, that said, so here I come with a course that says, let's dig up all that junk, all right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I knew that it had changed my life when I went through a soul care course in seminary. And as a Nigerian, I realized how much it freed me to be all that Christ called me to be. I was able to release a lot of the insecurities I carried. Man, by God's grace, through this, I dumped them. So I knew that it would impact people's lives, but I wasn't sure how receptive they would be. But man, God, talk about surprising.
Mm.
God not only showed up big time, but I think even supernaturally. Like, well, day one, when I was teaching the course, the first module is on releasing shame.
Mhm.
And it's funny because the first day, no one would interact with me. I would ask, like, okay, can you think back to any event where you experienced a shame attack? And no one, like, the first course was just weird. They weren't talking, and I'm panicking, like, oh gosh, I've gone where I shouldn't have gone. And it occurred to me that day two, I found this out the next morning because people came early to tell me this. They said, this is the first time anyone's ever spoken about shame, and
Mm.
that we don't talk about this and this. And so there's a lot. So day one was digging up a lot of the older
Yeah.
things that many of them came and said, we can sleep all night in a good way, because for the first time, we were able to understand where a lot of our hurt, our anger, our insecurity, or all of these behaviors, where it came from. And so testimony was just pouring out. So much so that I had at least 2 or 3 testimonies. One guy came to me midway through the session and he said, because one of the things we prayed for is like, Lord, if there is pain or emotional trauma in the past that they've either blocked away because of pain or that has shaped them, the Spirit of God grant revelation, like give supernatural insight. Well,
Yeah.
one guy comes to me during lunch on day 2 and he says, while I was speaking, that he saw a vision. He says, I've never seen one in my life. But he's like, while you were speaking, I saw a vision. And he says, the Lord took him back to an event that happened when he was 10 years old. This is a 40-something.
wow.
He said the Lord took him back to an event when he was 10 years old, when his father took him to a, here they call him babalawo, but that would be the same thing as a shaman or a voodoo doctor.
Okay.
And he said he saw the, and like, he remembered that the Lord was bringing to mind an event where they took him to a voodoo doctor when he was 10 years old, and the doctor gave him a specific thing to put on his body as a talisman of sorts.
Mhm.
And he said the Lord was revealing to him while I was speaking that that's where a particular sin issue in his life began, where a stronghold began. And he said that the Lord was showing him, I'm releasing you of that.
Right.
Oh,
And
wow.
I mean, he was, so, I mean, I had that level of revelation. So, you know, when you ask the question, what's been most surprising, I've been amazed at how much that course has really opened people's eyes. But one of the last classes is on identifying your sacred pathway. How do you best connect with God? So
Mhm.
there's this book on the sacred pathways by Gary Thomas. Anyway, I made that into a course, and then also on spiritual gifts. And turns out they've never talked about spiritual gifts. So many of
Oh,
them know
wow.
that they're good areas. So it was like, not only did we help you work through the wounds, but we helped you identify. So many of them were like, oh my goodness, no wonder I enjoy teaching. No wonder I enjoy this. So for me, the soul care course the impact has been surprising and has been delightfully surprising, because now I'm realizing that, oh, that's where I need to pour my energy into. Like thus far, my main keystone course has been the 12-week training on how to raise up godly elders, the one that I based off Armin's Timothy training. Yeah, so I converted it, and I'm actually hosting another course in September. But I think what's been surprising is how impactful soul care has been. So I think we're going to be incorporating that more into what we do. Wow,
That's amazing.
I was talking a lot there.
No.
No, but it was all good. Like, that's such a great like revelation and like a change that you're seeing. That's awesome.
Yeah, and you're also, again, preparing that foundation, that soil of even the people's hearts. I have kind of a question that goes to what you were just talking about, but it's not on our, list.
Oh, going rogue.
Kind of explain to our listeners, like, why is the soul care important when it comes to like our relationship with God? Like, why should we dig up, quote unquote, the past? Because I feel like a lot of Christians today don't realize the importance of like going back and realizing, okay, I do this today, I have this sin issue, and it is rooted in something that happened to me when I was 10, and why I need God, to like dig that up. What's the importance?
Yeah, a scripture says that it's for freedom that Christ set us free, right? And the truth is that if you have insecurity issues today and you give your life to Christ later on tonight, you'll probably still have some of that insecurity issues tomorrow morning. Right? So you don't become a Christian and all your garbage disappears the next day. I think some of that requires a daily surrender, right? So I think for me, part of why I did this course first of all was the impact it had on my life, right? I took a soul care with another professor in seminary, and I didn't even realize. That's the thing. Like, I think many people are not aware that some of their habits, hang-ups, their habits, unhealthy behaviors is not just, for instance, when I was in Jersey, I counseled a lot of guys who wrestled with pornography. And one of the things I learned pretty early on, like when I speak to them, the issue is not pornography. There's something there's a pain. You're looking for something, because pornography will never fill it. I mean, it's the same thing with alcohol. I think with addicts in general, the substance is not the issue. There's a pain that you're trying to silence. There's a voice that you're trying to mute. There's a hurt that there's a voice they're trying to silence, or a pain they're trying to numb. And so I found through ministry experience that healing, emotional healing, which is very closely tied to spiritual healing. I mean, how many ministry leaders do we know who have fallen out of ministry because of some toxic issue in their lives, right? And how many men have been kicked out of the pulpit, out of ministry because of this? And so in my personal experience, I found that when you address those past hurts, it actually brings more freedom to enjoy your relationship with Christ, right? I'll give you an example. If you've ever met a 21 or 31-year-old who acts like they're 17 or 18, right? You ever see a 40-year-old
Yeah.
who still dresses like it's high school,
Yeah.
right? I think what often happens is that early in life, when we experience a traumatic event, we get stunted emotionally. We keep
Yeah.
aging physically, but emotionally, we are not able to leave from that experience we had, right? And so soul care is about going back. I know some people would be like, well, just trust God and pray. I'm like, well, God, we're not trusting God any less by going to the past.
Right.
It's just when you work through those things,
Mhm.
emotional health and spiritual health are so intertwined that one often impacts the other. And to be clear, going back and looking at those emotional issues, man, we're inviting Christ into our wounds in the past to heal us so we may be free to serve him in the present.
Yeah.
I'm tempted to say you tracking with me. Like
Yeah.
I say in sermons a lot.
I am tracking with you, Shegz.
Track with me. Good.
Facing it with God, not on your own. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
What has been your favorite testimony or like God moment? And you shared already some, but is there anything that you see, I don't know, just like a moment that you remember specifically?
Since we've been here, or ministry, or just in general?
Both, whichever one, but since being there.
I've had I think well, let me start with family. I think for me, I don't know if it's one moment, but it's several moments, but I think it was probably the day we moved into the compound we're on. And my kids just went out to go play, and we didn't have to worry about them for like a whole hour.
That's nice.
That was a good feeling. I love that my kids, like that was a real, if I'm being honest, that was a real, among my many concerns. I had these nightmarish thoughts that, what if my kids come in, they're just crying every day? They, like that really troubled me before we came. And when they get to Nigeria, they just hate it. It's too hot. They're spicy. My middle kid, ironically enough, loves, critters now, but back home, he did not like spiders or ants. And I was just like, man, Nigeria's got a lot of these. They found
Like that's gonna be an adjustment for him.
yesterday in our backyard when I was there.
Oh.
Yeah, but so I would say family-wise, it's been watching my kids just be at home and making Nigeria home. Ministry-wise, my favorite moment, honestly, has to be that story I just shared with just with the soul care. Like it's once again, because I went through it, I know the freedom and the joy that comes from letting go of your past wounds, and so that has been for me probably the high point. I've had several high points in ministry, including there were. Oh, I guess now I'm saying it. I did a soul care light for orphans. I was invited to speak at a retreat to orphans several months ago, and that was rewarding, but that was painful. I've never spoken to a room full of kids with no parents, and I did something called a father blessing, where we basically invited each kid up and just affirmed them, like spoke to them face to face, had them look me in the eye, and just discerning, prayerfully asking God, what do you want me to say to this kid? And some of these kids had never heard anyone say, I'm proud of you, or I love you. And that as much as I want to say I was joyful, that hit me. I was shook up for a whole day after that. So I don't know if that was a high point, but
you're like, I need a soul care after this.
Yeah,
I do. I really do. I really do. I was like, I don't know if I want to come speak to a retreat of orphans anymore. This was painful. I mean,
but someone has to do it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I say that joke. I would do it if they invited me.
Yeah. We know.
But it was. I was just struck by how even when I would use examples in my sermon where about the Father's love, I had to constantly go, oh man, wait a minute, this makes like they don't have dad at home. They have a house mother at the orphanage home, and so. But anyway, you said favorite, not most depressing. So sorry I brought that up. Favorite had to be the soul care course and just the freedom. Like I mean, all through the 3 days, the stories I was hearing, I was like, the Lord sort of showed me this is going to be a breakthrough for Nigerians.
Right.
as the Lord opens more doors. So yeah.
That's awesome.
That's really awesome. So you've kind of touched on some of the projects you've done. So what are projects that you're currently working on that you're excited about and would like to share with us?
Yeah, so a couple of things. The one that I'm probably occupying my time right now is, right now I have a team of, well, I'm bringing on I have a team of 2 people already with me. One of them is an administration, sort of knows everyone. I call him my admin guy, sort of a jack of all trades. I recently brought on a translator. So one of the dialects, the northern dialects in Nigeria is Hausa. It is a northern dialect. And if you look at Nigeria on a map and you were to break Nigeria up in half, the lower half is mostly considered Christian, even though they're not all Christians, but it's considered Christian. And everything north is Muslim. And so most of north speaks this local dialect Hausa. And there are churches there. There are unreached people groups, but there are churches there. So we are working on releasing a podcast called the Nigerian Pastors Podcast.
Ooh.
And yeah, very excited about this. And the goal is really just to, it's two goals. One is to just encourage and minister to the pastor's heart. You know, Nigeria doesn't have pastors. There's no place for pastors to go to be poured into. Here, most pastors are on their own. So this is really just to bless their hearts. A lot of the content I'm teaching is just taking Bible lessons and speaking to their hearts. In fact, and then the other goal is to actually teach pastors how to do ministry. So some of the episodes we're recording include episodes like how to teach Old Testament narratives, how to do premarital counseling. Surprisingly enough, how to do a Bible study. You'd be amazed at how many pastors don't actually know how to do a Bible study. And then we're doing, like, for instance, the first episode we're going to release is called Can a Christian Lose Their Salvation? So sometimes I'll tackle theological issues that I know, hey, pastors probably don't know how to deal with this, you know, how to handle conflict resolution. Actually, the second episode is called The Dark Night of the Soul, What to Do When You Feel Like Quitting Ministry.
That's a cool title.
Right, The Dark Night.
Yeah.
It's a theological term that some ancient saints came up with it, but it describes the season of life where you're facing a faith crisis, you know. And so anyway, so we have these episodes. So right now we are working on releasing a podcast. Our goal is September.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah. So, and the way I like to work with podcasts, I like to pre-record everything in advance.
Yeah, it's easier that way.
Yeah. So right now, my goal is to write up 15 episodes. I think I'm 25 in right now. I'm sorry, 52 for the whole year. I'm gonna write 52 episodes. We're up to 25 right now.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, no, it is. And I'm cheating a little bit because
are you taking our podcast? Is that what you're doing? Okay.
No, I'm taking some of my old remix sermons that I preached like when I was at Remix and at Grace, and I'm just updating it. And I'm writing some newer stuff, but it's mostly a lot of older things that speak to specific areas of ministry, and I'm making it for Nigeria. And so anyway, so that's what we've been working on. I've been working on that. So when we release it each week on Monday mornings, it'll be in English and in Hausa.
Okay.
So recently I just hired in the process of hiring a translator. He's a recent seminary graduate and just sharp young man. His name is Ishiaku. So I've been meeting with him, talking to him through my sermon, so he kind of gets a sense of how I preach. And basically he's doing what I did for Armin, where I would preach Armin's sermon.
Okay.
He's doing my sermons in Hausa, in the local dialect. And then I just hired an audio engineer, which sounds fancy. He's just a college guy who knows how to do audio. And he's going to be recording it for us. So over the next few months, that's going to be our goal is. By first week in September, we start releasing it. And I actually stole that. Our goal is to release it on multiple platforms. So on iTunes, Spotify, where's my list here?
Is it the Google one?
iTunes,
Google
Spotify.
Podcast?
What's that?
Google Podcast.
Let me write that down. I asked him, I told him, I said, listen, bro, like I want to not Google Podcasts. So we have SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify. And then in Nigeria, apparently there's like 100 billion audio players. There's Boneplay, Deezer, Audio Mac. Anyway, I'm saying all that to say on those mornings, we're going to release it on multiple platforms.
Mhm.
Because our hope is, honestly, our vision for this is not just that it would minister to Nigerians, but to Africans.
Right.
The
Yeah.
secret to the prosperity gospel we're seeing in Nigeria is rampant in Africa.
Wow.
Wow.
And so we're praying that God really opens the door to minister beyond our borders. So
Mhm.
anyway, so excited about the podcast, working on that. We're, coming up next is another soul care seminar and our 12-week elder training. Dupe has been, my wife, Dupe, has been working on her holistic healing, holistic health business. And she's actually giving her first seminar this week to explain what holistic health is. And
Oh, that's exciting.
yeah, she's pretty pumped about that. That's actually taking place this Saturday, where she'll be sharing just how to eat healthy and be healthy and those things. And then I would say, so this is what I was hinting at earlier, I was going to bring up is one of the things that we have down the line, two things actually. One is I'm working with what's called the Rural Pastors Network, and it's an organization that goes into persecuted communities and ministers to pastors in those communities. And so we've partnered with them and we've asked them to help us identify so it's a local government area, which I guess would be the equivalent of a county.
Okay.
Ask them to help us identify a county that we as an organization. So right now in Nigeria, we are working, our organization is called the Gathering Faith Leadership Network. We actually have a website. It's the gatheringfaithleadership.network. And we've asked them to help us identify a county that we're going to adopt. And we're basically going to adopt that county. And so whatever pastors are in that community is who we're going to focus in. We're going to pour into those pastors and try to grow churches. So if we do outreach, it's going to be there. So they're helping us pray through, think through, so we can focus our energy. That way, if we're even working with Grace or any other church, we can say, hey, we're not just everywhere, we're in this community and this is what we're able to see.
Right.
And then there's that. And then lastly, this is more of a prayerful vision for the near future. And we're praying about building a training facility for pastors. Right now, I'm renting a small room. Can't really see it, but that's pretty much the size of my office. It's about half the size of my office at Grace. And it works because all four of us just we get really close. But in an ideal situation, we'd love to be able to either buy already used building or build from scratch a place where we can have weekly classes where we're training pastors. But that's coming up. Those are just some things that we're working on, praying through. That's
awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool. I hope you get your training facility soon.
I do, Alexa. I do. I pray it's, we're the space I'm renting here has some classes that we're able to use, but we got to schedule it. And he's been gracious. The guy who owns been gracious, but it would go a long way. But we're small, we're growing. I think the Lord will get us there. So there's no, we trust him for it.
Well, he's got you this far, so I'm sure he'll keep taking you further.
And we will definitely continue to pray.
Thank you.
So speaking of prayers, how can we pray for you and your family and the work that God has given you to do? We got finding you a church that you can connect with.
Yes.
And your facility, but what else could we pray for you?
Sure. I think that we're trying to discern about is it time to plant a church? Is it time to sort of revisit what the Lord told us to put aside earlier? We've been sensing that I feel like the Lord's like, I've brought some people around. So one of the things I've been asking God to confirm that is lead to us or lead us to people who will do this with us. And there are people, right? Remember I said part of why we didn't do it was because our team that we'd assembled, even from the States, had relocated. And so
are they coming back?
Not all of them.
Okay.
Not all. And then some have changed the dynamic, as in they're not based in Nigeria anymore. They're based in the States and just visit here. Whereas before they were based here and visiting the States. So and plus things have changed a little bit. But anyway, so we're trying to discern if it's time or when the right timing to pursue a plan initiative. So I would say that's one prayer. As far as our training goes, that God would continue to open doors for us to connect with ministries and pastors for training. Denominations here tend to be very territorial, and Nigeria is heavily denominational. Like it's a lot of the mega churches are actually within. It basically works like a franchise, like you know, and so everyone pays back to the boss, and it's like so. I pray that God opens doors for us to connect with ministries where we're able to train pastors. Right now, a lot of the training I've had has been with personal connections and one or two ministries that I know who invited me in. We're still the new guy in town, right?
Yeah.
So we're still establishing our that's the vision for the podcast, that if we release it weekly and word starts to get out, then they know who we are. Like,
right. And you're no longer the new kid on the block.
Exactly. It's like, oh, it's the Nigerian Pastors Podcast, you know, that gives us a legitimacy. So I would say those two things. Also God's ongoing protection. I said it at the beginning, but the violence has not eased up in Nigeria. Like between terrorist groups and armed banditry, it's not uncommon that gunmen will invade the entire neighborhood and just go house to house. Fortunately, it hasn't come near our area. But there's this, every time I go anywhere, if I get out of my car, I'm always like, literally, you lock the door and you kind of look around a good minute or two before you step out. And so you're living on that constant, might I die today, or I get shot or kidnapped. I was just talking to my wife the other day, coming up with a code word for if I ever get kidnapped, which not the conversation you ever want to have with your wife, but
yeah, that doesn't sound like a very fun one.
No, I know. She gave me the look. I was like, hey man, this stuff's real, man. So just God's ongoing protection. God has been gracious to us and has not let any harm come near us. And it's my inclination by faith that he'll continue to do that, but prayers never hurt. So yeah, so I would say protection, discerning church, training facility. I forget what the others were, but it's recorded. You can listen to
it. You guys can rewind if you don't remember the other ones.
Rewind, pray for it. Yeah.
It's the beauty of a podcast.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Shegz. We really missed you. So this was so fun to just talk to you and hang out with you again.
Thank you. Nah, this was fun to catch up with you girls, man. I miss this.
Yeah. I miss having you come into the office and just only come to my office because there's chocolate. So I miss that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I did do that.
Yeah.
Actually, times there, I'm like, I'm going to our office to go get some chocolate.
And then I'm in my office and you're like, how you doing? As you're stuffing your hand.
Yeah. Tell me about how you're doing, Alexa, as I eat all your chocolate.
I miss it.
That's great.
Miss you guys too. Miss Grace Church.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for joining us so much, Shegz. And for our listeners, our next podcast episode will be a Behind the Sermon series. Who it's with will be a surprise as per usual. And that should air, usually I'm the one that does this, so I should know when it airs, July 30th. Yes, that's when it's going up. So thank you so much for listening. And we can't wait to see you guys next time, or hear you guys next time. Well, you're here with us. Yeah, you get it.
It'll work. Yeah.
Fine. Bye.
Bye.